College football is the single largest sport in the United States. Yes, even larger than the NFL or cheese rolling. And I die on this hill. Why? Because I like cheese. And no, because no sports captures this country as thoroughly as this one. And one huge reason for that is the fan bases that define college football. Brands so large that they could probably rival the combined brand power of any two other professional sports teams, or 3 LA Chargers fan bases. And that's after they hired Jim Harbaugh. Because before, it was easily 5. Remember this because I'll mention it later. College football has fan bases so large, so encapsulating, that 8 of the 10 largest stadiums in the world are dedicated to these teams. And with the vast numbers of students flooding through each of these universities, these fan bases have global reaches. And today, I will look at each of these brands and tell you the biggest fan bases in college football. Now, before I go, I have to say that some of this is going to stem from opinion. I don't think that there is a truly objective way to measure this, and if there is, you're not going to find consistent answers for it. You can go on 10 different websites and get 10 different opinions on who is the biggest fan base in college football, and in turn college sports. But it doesn't mean that I haven't found any objective sources, or at least sources that I think are objective. See, I have 3 factors that I have used to help me define how large a brand is. These 3 factors are television watch numbers for football games, average football game attendance, and total athletic revenue. I use these numbers to create a combined ranking, giving these factors these weights. Remember, the lower, the better. Now note that the data for these fan bases, at least in terms of revenue, aren't exactly just for football. But at the same time, I'm going to bank on the idea that the amount of clout and revenue generated by every sports other than football, yes, even college basketball, is minuscule. So take that in mind. Now, I do have several honorable mentions. Schools that I made the measurements for, but for one reason or another, failed to size up to the 12 schools that I'm going to mention. These schools are Oregon, Nebraska, USC, Tennessee, and Texas A&M. For number 12, I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to find the biggest fan base in the ACC, as all but one in the real top 12 are in the Big Ten or SEC. Sorry, Texas A&M, I kind of just wanted to give the ACC more representation, but just know that you're the real number 12. But anyway, for the biggest in the ACC, it's between Clemson and Florida State. Know that I'm doing football only, so sorry Duke and North Carolina. But back to Clemson and Florida State, which one will I choose? Before crunching the numbers, I wasn't really sure, but now I can confidently say that Clemson is the overall larger fan base. Clemson has the stadium size, and thus the average attendance. They also have the edge in athletic revenue and the edge in TV numbers, although this was really close. So congrats Clemson, you are the biggest school in the ACC, and number 12 in my rankings. Or technically number 13, but take your wins. Number 11 is Florida. I wasn't really considering their program that much at first, but after seeing their strong numbers really across the board, they were deserving of a spot in this list. I feel as if this is a good spot to introduce another tool of mine, the New York Times zip code map. Now note that this is not influencing these rankings at all, as 1, this map is from a decade ago, and 2, I think they randomly favor or disfavor major schools for pretty much no reason. Like they love North Carolina, despite North Carolina not really showing up in any of these other 3 rankings that I did. This could also be the effect of me not counting for basketball prowess. Nevertheless, I think it's a cool visual at the very least, so just roll with it. But back to Florida. Florida is the most popular university in Florida, which is saying a lot since I already mentioned Florida State. And note, there is also Miami way down south as well. But Florida has, albeit slightly, won over the people of Florida like no other college, giving them consistently strong numbers despite their team lacking relevance in recent years, constantly falling into mediocrity due to them having one of the hardest schedules year in and year out. And yet, they still have a strong following. They have captured major metropolitan areas such as Jacksonville, Lakeland, Gainesville, of course, and Tampa Bay. Although, I think this map undersells Central and South Florida. Nevertheless, as a strong SEC power in a very populous state, Florida takes the 11 spots. Number 10 is Oklahoma. Oklahoma is what I consider to be the most popular program in the Great Plains. I also saw a guy consider Oklahoma as the 10th month of the year. How appropriate. Just like Florida, they have consistent and high numbers across the board, with the 10th highest TV numbers, the 13th highest average attendance, and the 11th highest athletic revenue. They are worthy of a top 10 spot, and like Florida, they dominate their states, even with a decent-sized Oklahoma state there. I do agree with this map when it shows them having the plurality of fans even in regions of Kansas, Missouri, and Colorado, as I don't consider this as the most popular school in Oklahoma, but the entire Great Plains. Number 9 is Auburn. This is the most popular school that I could ascribe towards being a little brother school, or a school that is not the most popular in their state. And mind you not, Alabama is not an extremely populous state either. This state just goes to show you how influential SEC football is, as Auburn definitely has a significant fan base by their high watch numbers, ranked 8th in the country, so somebody is watching these games. They also are part of the Iron Bowl, a top 2 rivalry game in college football. Number 8 is Penn State. Penn State has a huge fan base. I go as far to say that they are a significant step up compared to the previous schools on this list. They sport numbers that all lie in the top 10, including having the second largest stadium in the country, and consequently, the second largest average attendance. They are the premier program in the state of Pennsylvania, which I think should speak more volumes since it is the 5th largest state in the country. They are also the premier program in Delaware and southern New Jersey according to the map. It also helps to be dominant throughout Philadelphia, a city that is very passionate about its sports, giving Penn State the 3rd highest spot out of all of the Big Ten schools, a position in that conference they know all too well. Next is number 7, which is LSU. They have very consistent rankings across the board, being ranked 6th, 6th, and 8th respectively. They are completely dominant across their states and have the luxury of being a historical and relevant SEC program. They are also a program who I would say is able to have a significant fan base not just across Louisiana, but across the entire country. They are most certainly a name you'd think of when you see a list like this one. Number 6 is one of my most controversial picks, and that is Georgia, and let me explain why. See, Georgia is a school that has an undoubtedly large fan base, a huge fan base even. Their numbers are huge, being 5th in TV numbers, 8th in average attendance, and 7th in revenue. Their program should be 5th if I was solely going by data, but I dropped them a spot mainly because I just had the nagging feeling that so much of this data just rode on them being super successful today, rather than them really having a super large fan base. Don't get me wrong, you guys are still large, it's just not. I do think you guys are oversold just a little bit. And sure, you can make the argument that most of these schools on here are oversold a little bit due to recent success, but that really applies to Georgia more than everybody else. But what do you guys think? Did I make the right decision here? Let me know in the comments. I'm sure you guys have very, very personal opinions about this, so go right ahead. And if you want to see similar content like this, maybe subscribe to this channel. Now, the top 5, really the top 6 or even 7 schools are schools that I think are just on a different level. If you know even a little bit on college sports, you know exactly who they are. But the real question is, what order I place them in. I think every single school from here on out has a legitimate argument to be the most popular school in the country, although some have more of an argument than others. So let me introduce you to my number 5 school, Texas. Texas was actually 7th in the data rankings, but I just had a nagging feeling that they were a larger brand and fan base compared to Georgia. They managed to be the most defined school in the 2nd most popular state in the United States, while still being one of the more popular schools even in other regions of the United States. although I don't think they're nearly as dominant as what the New York Times map says, as you have to remember that TCU, SMU, Houston, Rice, and UTSA all exist, and A&M did just barely miss the list, so take this with a grain of salt. At least take the map with a grain of salt, not my ranking. You know what, take my ranking with a grain of salt too again. This is a very controversial pick. And also, according to this map, surprisingly, Texas is the most popular college in North Dakota, at least among FBS schools. Although I'm personally not so sure about that. If you are from the Dakotas, can you confirm or deny this? At number 4 was another school that I wasn't 100% sure about. I feel as if they could be several spots lower, but they may also have a case to be number 1. At least, it seems like that if you're one of their fans. That school is Notre Dame. They are an anomaly as they have no prestigious conference tied with them, nor are they really reliant as having a strong following from their region even. They do a really good job at having an incredible amount of fans throughout the entire world. They are top 5 in both watch numbers and revenue, although I'm not too sure about the source since this did come from a different spot than the rest, but everything seemed to line up pretty well. And one thing that does help Notre Dame is the fact that they are the premier Catholic school in the country. The extent of how much that helps, I'm uncertain of, but being the flagship school of the largest religious denomination in the country should help, right? Now, there are 3. Honestly, I think these are pretty close. You could probably put any 3 in any order and argue for hours on it. While Texas, Georgia, and Notre Dame could have a small case at being the most popular, these 3 all have significantly more reasons to have the top spots. This is the main reason why I used this data, was to really tiebreak everything, especially up here, just because everything here was just so close. So let's start with who I put at number 3, Alabama. Alabama, I think, is the flagship SEC school, as much as other SEC schools would probably hate that. They have a giant stadium that is packed every single game, averaging at 4th in attendance. Meanwhile, they have the 6th highest revenue market in the country, and their watch numbers are ranked 2nd, consistently pulling in millions of viewers every single game. Alabama is not just the largest program in Alabama, which isn't as populous when you're comparing it to Texas, Florida, or Pennsylvania, but it is a school that represents the entire Southeast. And once again, it is a school that is able to just have fans everywhere. Even if you are across the country in Washington or Maine, you would not be too hard-pressed to find an Alabama fan. And it is for this reason that their name is synonymous with college football. Now, I face a predicament. As a few of you know, I am a student that attends one of these top schools. As a student of this school, I'm obliged to absolutely abhor the other remaining school on this list. Right now, I want nothing more than to give the number 1 spot to my school and nothing less than to give it to my rival. But sadly, very sadly, the data disagrees with me. So at number 2 is Michigan. They have the largest stadium, and therefore the highest attendance numbers throughout all of college football. They have the 3rd highest TV watch numbers, once again sporting millions of viewers a game. And they have the 4th highest athletic revenue. The geography of Michigan's fan base is interesting, because although this school dominates the state of Michigan, especially while sharing the state with Michigan State University, the school that I should mention also has an extremely large fan base that should probably be added to the honorable mention list, as it is certainly a top 20 fan base. But Michigan just has an exceedingly large number of fans outside of the state. They have the most out-of-state fans in this list, maybe even higher than Notre Dame. It's one of those 2 schools. I say that because Michigan has a large fan base in almost every single major population center in the country. The New York Times map has Michigan as the most popular school in both downtown Chicago and Manhattan. And honestly, that's one of the takes of theirs that I believe the most. And they have some very wild takes on there. And it's not just my bias. It's so weird how much I ask students from Ann Arbor, where are they from? And they say New York City. In fact, the amount of people in Ann Arbor from Westchester County, New York is insane. And that's not even half of it, as Michigan still has considerable chunks of the population in Boston, DC, and San Francisco. I'd even go as far to say that they have a defined international presence as well, mainly because their school just has so many international students. By the way, remember when I said that the Chargers went from 1/5 of a major college franchise to 1/3 of it? Well, Michigan is why, but enough about that. I've glazed enough. Number 1 is Ball State. Truly a magnificent fan base. Just representing all of the balls in the United States is such an amazing feat. Oh, wait. Sorry, I was looking at the bottom of the list. Number 1 is a school that is worse than that joke I just made. Ohio State. They are 1 in watch numbers, 1 in revenue, and 3 in average attendance. Most major sources that quantified any statistics relative to a fan base or brand size almost always had Ohio State as number 1. Ohio State has a giant out-of-state presence, but what I think helps them the most is their massive in-state presence. They virtually have no competition. They don't even share their state with another power team, well, at least until 2 years ago. While Michigan maybe has 2/3 of their state, a big maybe with 10 million people, and Alabama has 2/3 of their state, another big maybe with 5 million people, Ohio State has not just the majority, but the plurality of their states of 12 million people. At least 10 million that is, of whom lean towards being Ohio State fans. Every part of their state bleeds Ohio State, except maybe each part of Toledo and Cincinnati. But just know that being the biggest does not mean that you're the best, because I need an entirely different video just to explain how much you suck.